Hi, I'm Lisa Rubel from Love to Color My World, and I'm here today with a quilt idea for using up those fabulous packs of 5-inch pre-cut squares. You can purchase a bunch of different types of 5-inch square packs on the Sit and Sew Fabrics website, and with your purchase you can download a free quilt pattern to use for those squares. And this quilt pattern is called On Edge, and it's all about the half square triangles. It's super easy to make. Half square triangles are great fun to do because it's just one drawn line, 2 stitch lines, 1 cut, and you're done. So I'm going to show you how to put those blocks together so that you can make this On Edge quilt yourself. So let's look at how we can use the On Edge quilt pattern and 5-inch squares to make a fun and easy quilt. What you're going to need for this pattern is a pack of 5-inch squares and 7/8 yard of a contrasting fabric. I've got a white on white print here, and we'll be cutting that into 5-inch squares as well so we can pair it together with our pre-cuts. So let's get started. So I'm going to grab a couple of these fabrics, and I've got, grab one more. I've got some 5-inch squares to work with. You want to find the back side of your fabric. If you're working with a white on white print like I am, sometimes you have to just double check that to make sure you're on the back side. The first thing we're going to do is to draw a line with a fabric marking pen from one corner to the diagonal corner. Now, if you've got an air-soluble pen, you don't want to draw all of your lines at the same time because the lines could fade before you get to cutting them all. If you're using a water-soluble one, that's not as much of an issue, but even so, maybe just do a couple at a time instead of drawing them all, just in case. I'm going to draw a few more. And what you can do too is you can line a couple of these up on your cutting board like this. And then they won't be lined up perfectly, but you can draw one line and then move down and draw the next line without having to reposition every single time. So once that's done, you're going to take one of your marked squares and one of your print squares from the pre-cut pack and put them right sides together. And if you want, you can throw a couple pins in just to secure them away from that line that you drew. And then we're going to sew a seam 1/4 inch from that drawn line down the center, and then 1/4 inch off of the other side of that drawn line. So I'm going to do those two, and what you can do is just pivot at the end, pull your needle up and pivot to go back down the other side, and just sew both right in one sewing session. Okay, so I've got my 2 stitch lines, each about 1/4 inch off of that center line. And the next step is to cut on that original drawn line. So line your ruler up from corner to corner and cut all the way down. And now we've got 2 separate half square triangle units. I'm going to bring those over to my iron. I prefer to press my seams away from my light colored fabric so that I can't see the seam allowance through. If you don't have a light colored fabric, then you can just press whichever way you want, but it makes sense to press them all in the same direction. So always press away from your print or away from your coordinating print. And then the next step is to trim these to 4.5 inches square. So if you've got a smaller square ruler, like I've got a 6.5 inch one here, that's a nice handy one to use for this. You want to align that diagonal line on the ruler with your seam line. And then I like to trim 2 sides at once if you're comfortable cutting with your rotary cutter sideways, because then I only have to line the ruler up twice. So I've got 2 sides cut, and now I'm going to, in addition to lining up that diagonal line, I'm going to make sure that the cut edges from my block are on the 4.5 inch square line, and I'm going to trim there. You can see I've got my corner off. There wasn't much to trim, which means I did a good job sewing. And I've got my half square triangle block. And so you'll just continue making these with all of your pre-cut squares and with your cut and marked white squares. We're going to be making 80 of these half square triangle units. So that'll be using 40 of the squares from the 42 square pack. So you'll have 2 left over. So we're going to make 80 of these half square triangle units. And after you do that, you'll lay them out into rows, and you'll have 10 rows of 8 blocks each. So that's a good time to either use a design wall, or if you've got just like to lay your blocks on the floor, but get your colors spread out, get the fabrics that are alike spread out, and create the look of your quilt. Make sure all of your half square triangles are going in the same direction as well. And then when you go to sew them into rows, you'll alternate your pressing for each row. So for the first row, you'll press all of the blocks in the seam allowances in one direction, and for the second row, you'll press in the opposite direction. And that way when you go to join the rows together, you can nest those seams and you'll end up with real nice corners where 4 different blocks meet. So this quilt goes together really quickly. Once you've got your half square triangles made, you're just going to join them up and you'll have a fantastic smaller size quilt that you could even make in an afternoon. And you'll then stack up your backing, your batting, and your quilt top, base those layers together, then quilt it however you would like, and use binding to finish it up, and your quilt is done, and you found a great use for those 5-inch squares. Enjoy!